Hello, everybody. We're going to get started. I wasn't sure how loud this microphone is going to be, but it is kind of reverberating, so that's good. Everybody will be able to hear us. We're happy to see folks out in the auditorium here for Bob's talk on the Himalayas, and we're very excited for that. We're also happy to know that we have Zoom attendees. I'm not exactly sure how many people we have on Zoom, but it is a beautiful afternoon, so I know we're all enjoying the lovely weather. And of course, it will be recorded, so people will have an opportunity to listen to it later at a more convenient time. So I'm just wanting to welcome everybody, and we do have one bit of business to take care of. Shall I do it now? Which is our board elections. So you might not have known you were in for this great fun prize, but we have a slate of candidates who are already on our board, and so we're proposing to re-elect them. The slate of candidates are Ramiro Aragon, Ron Rentschler, Deborah Schlenoff, Isaac Scott, Mavis Souls, and Rebecca Waterman. When we go through the election process, we have a constitution, and our board of directors can consist of 9 members. Our slate of candidates was published in the May-June newsletter, so people would know that this was going to happen. And any Lane Audubon members present at this meeting, whether in person or via Zoom, will be electing the board of directors. And then they can, once they're re-elected, they can then elect officers and members to serve subsequently. So I did give you the slate of candidates, and I would like a motion from the floor to proceed to move. Okay, I have Milo is moving, and do I have a second? I have at least one second. And so it has been moved and seconded that the slate of members will be elected. Only Lane Audubon members can vote. So those in favor, please say aye. If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand. Anybody say aye? Aye. Thank you. Anybody opposed? Nope. Okay. So the motion passes. Congratulations to our board, and we thank you all for participating. And that's my part of tonight's thing. I think Debbie also has an announcement to make or two. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to take an opportunity to encourage everybody to volunteer. The weather's nice. It's great to get outdoors. We have a lot of fun stuff going on here at Lane Audubon, including an initiative to become a bird-friendly community. If you want to get involved in that, please contact me. We'd love to have a big team for this. As part of that community building, we are helping to make native plant gardens at local schools, and it's been a lot of fun to be out there digging in the weeds with kids and parents and Lane Audubon meeting people and folks from the UO. So please join us for that. Volunteer if you can with Eugene Parks and Open Spaces. They have a lot of volunteer opportunities on their website, and it's another place where you can help contribute to native habitat. And volunteer to do something at home. Put out a flowering pot with a native bloomer. Put some native plants in your yards that bloom. Support the pollinators and birds. It's just a small something that we can all do. But if we all do it, we create the connectivity that's needed for the animals that live among us here in town to survive. So please help the pollinators. Please help the birds by being bird friendly in your garden. Thank you, everybody. And I'll pass it on to Dennis.
Good evening, everyone. I always like to tell you a little bit about what's coming up before introducing tonight's speaker. So I want to let you know that next fall, starting on September 27th, the Lane County Audubon Society will have its monthly program meetings at the Campbell Community Center near Skinner Butte Park. We will miss the congenial atmosphere of the Eugene Garden Club. However, the Campbell Center offers us the ability to continue having meetings with an in-person audience as well as an at-home audience. The Campbell Center has ample parking, a large meeting room, good ventilation, and advanced audio-visual equipment. The September program meeting will feature Bill Sullivan. We all know Bill, he's done several programs for us. He's going to talk about the most spectacular trails in the Pacific Northwest, It will be fun to start the new program season at the Campbell Center with Bill Sullivan. Our speaker tonight grew up in the foothills of the Himalayas in India. He was fascinated with natural history and cultural diversity at an early age. He came to the United States for college, earning a Ph.D. in zoology from Michigan State University. He returned to India and Nepal, where he led more than 250 treks into the Himalayan mountains. He also traveled to many of our world's special biological regions, from the Namib Desert in Africa to the tropical rainforest of the Amazon. He is a professor in the Future Generations Graduate School Master's Program in Community Change and Conservation. His appreciation for nature extends beyond the flora and fauna to the dynamic relationship between diverse cultures and our natural world. He and his father wrote the first modern field guide to the birds of Nepal. Among his other publications are Canoeing Down the Zambezi, Peru's Interoceanic Highway, Across the Tibetan Plateau, The General Ecology, Flora and Fauna of Midland, Nepal, and many others. We have an extraordinary speaker tonight. He will take us back to his home, the Himalayas. It is with great pleasure that we present to you tonight's speaker, Bob Fleming.
Fine. Thank you, Dennis. And thanks to the Lane County Audubon for an invitation to share some of the Himalayan pictures with you. Not only pictures, but thoughts. The problem is that I'm trying to portray what we think of when we think of the Himalayas. What do we mean by Himalayan? That's my focus today, is what do we mean by Himalayan? What can be included? And the other point of I like to introduction is that this is an overview. When you have this much mountain system to cover, it isn't easy to put it all into one little talk. So I apologize for those that were expecting some other things, but this is what I see when I think of the Himalayas. Now, this zebra is the first time ever seen in the Himalayas. Zebras are not really well known. Oh, here we are.
Try the next one.
This is an overview of the Himalayas as I see it. Now, many people will see it differently, and there are so many things to cover that I won't be able to spend any time in one particular spot. We'll have to zip through. So here we are up in the hills. You can see a bit of clouds, and we move on to one of the spectacular mountains of Nepal, Manaslu. You can read the caption, so I don't have to tell you what's there. It's quite exciting to see these mountains, but it's clear air. And often it isn't clear, often it's cloudy. You're really lucky to get some kind of clear weather, depending on what's going on. And of course, these days there's pollution. So that from lower elevations, particularly below 12,000 feet, most of these peaks are pretty well blurred out because of pollution, as you would expect. But that's the way it goes. And then the clouds build up during the day, and by evening, you rarely see the peaks. This is a sunset picture, which is unusual because of the cloud formations that do occur in these mountains. This is a moist mountain system. It isn't, at least in the eastern part, central part is moist. West is not quite so moist. Now, this is a bit of a map to show you what's going on. It's 2,200 miles east to west. So that if you started from here and you could head down to past Mexico City, and who knows where you would go to the south. But there are several countries involved: Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, and then of course China on the north side. So it's a multiplicity of people and multiplicity of languages. In this whole area, there's an incredible number of languages. Just Nepal alone, which is 500 miles east and west in the central part of the system, is over, I think it's I've heard 159 different languages spoken as mother tongues. So the Himalayan mountain system really does add up. And you won't remember all these ranges, but these ranges all have developed because the Indian continent pushed up against Asia. So here they are, they're all developed because of that. On the other hand, they have slight differences so that they are identifiable, and the geology sometimes and the other aspects are different from range to range. The lowest range, the outer Himalayas, is called the Siwalik, the Churi range, down there at the bottom of the list there. There's also a north-south latitude change, as you can see here, 10 degrees actually, which is quite a bit of latitude change from here down to San Jose. Down to, well, probably down to Los Angeles would be 10 degrees. And then there's also a moisture gradient. In the west, it gets quite dry, and there isn't any monsoon or very little monsoon in the summer, monsoon rain, but there's quite a bit of snow sometimes in the winter, particularly at high elevations. And the east, it gets quite wet. Moving along, there are Himalayan biological belts, and these then range from the low elevation to the high. And two of these are marked with a blue spot there. This is where most of the people in the Himalayas live. This is very comfortable elevation for folks to live. So here we are at subtropical and warm temperate is where most of the people live. Now, if you can get behind the range, the people can live at 12,000 feet in the rain shadow. But down the south edge of the country, of the Himalayan system, it's really very hard to farm or even live under the wet conditions that you see. And then there are 5 seasons in the central Himalayas. Notice that central is underlined because as you go north towards the west and as you go east, basically the seasons change a little bit. In the west, there isn't any pre-monsoon. You have basically just have a summer season like we have here. But boy, I'll tell you, there's a pre-monsoon in the east. So it gets mighty wet in the east, in the pre-monsoon, before the monsoon comes. And it's the most severe weather. The monsoon is kind of gentle, really. You think the monsoon is, oh, bad, but it's basically pretty gentle. What is the additional to that is that you have a tornado, a cyclone coming from the Bay of Bengal, and that adds a lot of moisture to the system. And people say, oh, the monsoon is really tough. It's actually not the monsoon per se, but it's another system that's coming on top of the monsoon. So we'll move along. We'll see a few things here along the way. Now we started, my condition here is let's start in the lower parts and move upward. Then after that, we'll take an east to west survey. So we have 2 directions going from low country to high, and then from east to west. So here we are low. This is right down at the base. Actually, we're in the plains. This is the Gangetic Plain or the Brahmaputra Plain. And looking north is the first range of the Himalayas. This is called the Siwalik Range. And it can be called the outer Himalayas, if you wish, the outer. But it's a very special area with interesting geology. And we'll see more of it here shortly. And one of the exciting animals that lives in this area in Bhutan is the langur, the golden langur, quite rare, and is limited to a very small area within the Siwalik range of Bhutan. Langurs there are about 12 or 15 species, depending how you judge them, and they're very gentle leaf-eating monkeys. So I find them very pleasant, very attractive animals. Langur monkeys. Aha, here's the Siwalik landscape. This shows you a little bit of what the geology is like. Most of this is all sedimentary, and it's siltstones and basically mudstones mixed with conglomerates. Now, there are other things too, but basically that's the 3 main elements of the Siwaliks. So they erode quite quickly. And you can see a lot of erosion here. But because of the erosion, and if there has been some fossil evidence or the animals living back in the late Pleistocene, and then entombed in the Siwaliks, they sometimes show up. So this is a fossiliferous area in some parts, particularly over in Pakistan. And here's another feature here. We're moving along quickly here. This is what I want to show here is the Dune Valley. Now you can see the Siwalik Range back there, It's beyond the Dune Valley, and the Gangetic Plain then extends beyond that. So the Dune Valley actually is within the Himalayan system. So when I think of the Himalayas, anything that lives in the dune is Himalayan. It makes it sort of a strange combination, but that's important because the dune is a very active part of the Himalayan conservation systems. Now, this is the Chitwan Dune in Nepal, and this you can see the Siwalex there beyond. Beyond the Siwalex is the Gangetic Plain, and the Chitwan National Park, as you can see, established in 1973. This is to protect the one-horned rhinoceros. The one-horned rhino is a very special animal, and in the Himalayan system, it is only found in Chitwan and a couple of other places where it's been transported to, and it actually quite successfully been reintroduced into some areas. The one-horned rhinoceros is quite common in a place called Kaziranga over in Assam to the east. There are over 1,000 animals there, but here they're listed about 600 rhinoceros in this one preserve, which seems to be awfully a lot. But on the other hand, that's what they say. And the Indian one-horned rhinoceros is not a small animal, particularly if you're in a small tree above it, because it was coming along the trail and you climbed up into the tree. Man, you have to be very high. I mean, it really is spectacular. The thing is 12 feet long, 12 feet, 6 feet high, 5,000 pounds, and you're up in this tree with this animal below you. You don't dare drop out. I mean, it's a stunning animal at close range, and they're not exactly slow either. If they want to charge you, which they don't, these are pretty gentle. They're not totally gentle, but they're pretty gentle compared to the black rhino of Africa. So if they do charge, they can go up to 50 miles an hour. You haven't any chance to escape. Even the best runners in that room here would not be able to escape. That's a Himalayan animal. Now another Himalayan animal, elephant. Come on now, elephants in the Himalayas. There they are. This is in the Patli Dune. Patli Dune is now it's over in India towards the west of Chitwan, and there are a good many, probably again about 600 elephants in this particular dune area. So the Indian Indian rhinoceros, the Indian elephant is quite well known in the Himalayas, and they actually can climb. They're good climbers actually in some parts of the Himalayas, particularly in the east. They go up to 6,000 to 7,000 feet up in the mountains. So they're not exactly all plains animals. And in this Corbett National Park, where we're just there now, one of the features there is well, I don't have to tell you what this is, but they like water. They lie in the water, they walk across the water. And the conservation program now with this Corbett National Park has been very successful in preserving the tiger. We have approximately 300 tigers in that area, which is really quite amazing. It's a really carrying capacity. You can't get many more in there. You have to have food, you have to have space, you have to have habitat, and that's pretty much it for tigers. So it's really quite an exciting time. And what do the tigers look like close up? Well, you know what tigers look like. There's no problem about looking at what tigers look like. Now, but what do the tigers do? They prey on the spotted deer. One of my favorite look at this beautiful deer. It's one of my favorite in the world. There are, of course, beautiful deer around, but this is quite exceptional. And boy, the tigers really like the spotted deer. It's a major food source for the animals. So if you preserve habitat, you're going to preserve the deer, and then you'll have to help preserve the tiger. Now we have birds in the area too, of course, and the top bird that you see there is a chloropsis, and it's basically a nectar feeder and fruit feeder. And it's there are about 12 species of chloropsis in South and Southeast Asia. They're not found anywhere else except that region. And these pictures are from Ron Hess, which an old friend of mine from many years ago. He very kindly donated the pictures so I could show you some pictures to the Audubon Club. And there's a laughing thrush on the left-hand side. This is a very active type of bird. They cackle, cackle, cackle. That's the laughing. That's basically an alarm call. An alarm call, so that if you hear this cackling, you know something's going on. It could be a snake, could be a leopard, it could be a tiger. Who knows what it is? Well, they won't alarm at humans, but it is something that they're alarmed at. The cackling, the laughing part is the alarm call. Then we're moving now quickly up to the subtropical. In the eastern part of the Himalayas, particularly in Arunachal Pradesh, in the far east, say 400 miles of the eastern Himalayas, is particularly good subtropical forest. And you can see here the tree fern is an indicator. As you go farther west, it isn't as together. You find that there are a good many places where there is no subtropical forest because of agriculture and people living. So as you go farther west, the subtropical forest is badly, I should say, alterated, not necessarily badly, but alterated. And one of the flowers found in the subtropics is this beautiful Salagini orchid. This is the biggest of the Salagini orchids. There are about 200 species around the world, and this is found strictly in the Himalayas at the subtropical elevations, on cliffs. And it likes dripping water in cliffs. Barbets. Barbets used to be classified all in one group, the African, South American, and the Asian. But now the Asian has been separated out. And they are fruit eaters. So if you find barbets, you know you have a pretty good supply of fruit, not only just for December or January, but for the entire year. These animals really cannot survive, or these birds can't survive without fruit. That means basically fruit, and also, of course, some insects and occasional lizard, something like that. They're a bit omnivorous, but mostly fruit. And they call, and they sit in a tree. You can't see them because they're so green. They're calling, calling, calling. Where are they? Very hard to see amongst all the green leaves. And you get to the Kathmandu Valley. Now we're moving west. We've come several hundred miles from the far part of the east. Kathmandu Valley is subtropical, but it gets pretty cold because it's a basin, and in the winter it gets to be below freezing, which is hard on subtropics. Whatever the case may be, this is a much inhabited valley, 200 square miles and 1 million people living here. Lots and lots of people in the Himalayas. The Himalayas is very much of a cultural event. When you go, it isn't necessarily a forest or birds or rhinoceros. It's people, people, people. And that's part of the fun of it. Rice planting. Rice does pretty well up to 5,000 feet, not too well above that. But it's quite seasonal, has to come in the early part of the summer into the monsoons. Rice planting, and rice is a very, very important part of the diet of these people in the Kathmandu Valley. And there are all kinds of birds in the valley. We did what we call, you might say, a Christmas bird count. Only 3 groups of us, though, with only 2 people each. It wasn't really much of we didn't have many recruits. But we came up with 180 species of birds on the Christmas bird count within the valley. So it is a good area for birds, particularly in the winter when the birds are down for the winter and for the cold season. This is one bird found only in Nepal. This is called the spiny babbler, and it's one of the famous birds of the country because it is found only in Nepal. And babblers are a subgroup or a group related to the laughing thrushes. And so they do also alarm when they see danger. This one's on a nest at about 5,000 feet to the north edge of Kathmandu Valley. And there are not too many biting things. I mean, you find there's at 9,000 feet in hemlock forest, you get these no-see-ums, the little biting gnats, and man, they're bad news. for basically in June. So I would recommend you don't go to the hemlock forests in Himalayas in June. Otherwise, there's hardly anything that bites, hardly any ticks, you hardly get any fleas, but below 5,000 feet or below 4,000 feet, there are mosquitoes. So it's best to, if you go, best to camp at the low country in winter when the mosquitoes are gone. But this is an amazing fly. That's called a proboscis. It sticks out there. It's nectar from a special kind of we call it the peacock flower. It's kind of an iris that grows and comes, it's synonymous with the emergence of this fly. Now we're moving up to the warm temperate forest, which is largely, can be, in parts can be kind of Castopsis or Chinquapin, and along with laurels, common at this elevation. We're talking 3,000 to 6,000 feet here. 6,000 to 9,000 feet, warm temperate in Bhutan. Bhutan has wonderful forests. Bhutan is an amazing country because 50% of the country is in national parks under conservation. It just quite exciting. The government says that the country has to be 70% under forest canopy. This is amazing. For a whole 70% of the country under the forest canopy, 50% under conservation surveillance. It's a small country, but nonetheless very remarkable, as you can see here. There are many, many things there to see besides just a few trees. We'll go on moving here. Oh, yes, yes. Now this is a maidenhair that you can buy in the stores here. We have some in our garden, which we bought from the Blooms. They're on Deerhorn there, the Bloom Nursery. They specialize in ferns. What a beautiful thing. Maidenhairs are just wonderful, as you know, grow on limestone. Now these aren't so wonderful in a sense. If you get these stirred up, you had better beware. These are rock bees, and they're vicious if they get stirred up. Now they're out in the open. This is the open. They don't have a hive. They have combs, and they cover the comb outside, and so that they have to be aggressive. Otherwise, the comb would be eaten up by whatever animals would like the honey. So it's really a big bee, and I can assure you, it's vicious. If you disturb them, if you don't disturb them, they're fine. Now there are different types of birds. The blue-capped rock thrush is one of my favorites. It comes up in the summer. This is a summer migrant that comes into the Himalayas in the summer, which is an indicator that there are certain birds that come into the Himalayas from the lower country or go back down into India in South Asia during the winter. The blue-capped rock thrush is an example of that bird. Now the gray chestnut thrush, we call it gray-headed thrush. Chestnut thrush is resident. It will move altitudinally from say 9,000 feet down to say 8,000 feet, but not very far. And it is related to our American robin. As you can see, it's very similar in shape, though not in color. Has a nice song, and is, again, we're talking about warm and temperate here. Now we're getting to the cold temperate already. It doesn't take long to climb up. Actually, when you actually walk uphill, you only have to go 3,000 feet to change zones. And if you're driving, you're 10 minutes. You're from one zone to the next. A whole change of plant life, whole change of bird life, whole change of insect life. It's quite remarkably fast because the mountains are steep. And not many places you can drive that fast up these hills, and certainly can't walk that fast. It takes quite a while to walk 3,000 feet uphill. But nonetheless, there we are. Here we're in the cold temperate already. Oh my goodness, here we are. Now, these are called Himalayan hemlocks. Same genus we have here, right here in around the U of O, genus Suga. And it has certain specialties that are found in that forest. And one of them is the red panda. Now, the red panda is actually not a panda. It's related closer to a raccoon. As you can see, it looks kind of raccoonish. They live in basically in hemlock and in fir forest. They like fir forest a lot. And then they climb up the trees to sleep, and then they come down and eat bamboo and other things too. So they're fairly wide ranging, rather than the giant panda is strictly bamboo, so it doesn't range too widely. But in this case, they eat other things too. So the red panda extends from here in central Himalayas all the way east to China, right on the edge of the Great Basin of Sichuan. So it's quite a long range. And this could be called a Sino-Himalayan species, not necessarily Himalayan or Chinese, but Sino-Himalayan is a term used. Aha. Ooh, look at that bird at the top there. What the heck is that? That's a wren tit. We have wren tits around here. It looks a little heavier than a wren tit, doesn't it? This is a parrotbill, and the parrotbill and the wren tit is considered possibly the closest relationships to the wren tit here is very enigmatic. We actually don't really know how it got here or what it's related to, but it's very close to parrotbills, as you can see. And some people say it is most closely related to a parrotbill. Then another bird, the barwing, is one of these babbler things. Now, there used to be a huge family of all kinds of birds called the Himalayas. And but you could tell that they weren't all related in one family, and DNA analysis has separated them out into different families. So this is a special group by itself, the bar wings. It's basically a moss forest, as you can see, kind of a cloud forest with nesting in moss, and it's insect eater as well as berries. Aha, here's some gallinaceous birds. Now, Ron has a nice picture here of the blood pheasant, and this is found at about 10,000 11,000 feet, which is just at the sort of top level of the cold temperate. The snow partridge then is even a little bit higher, and sometimes up beyond the cold temperate. But the blood pheasant is found all the way from central Nepal to China, edge of Sichuan, edge of the Great Basin of Sichuan, again, Sino-Himalayan species. The snow partridge, though, is strictly Himalayan and does not range very far. We all are very fond of rhododendrons here because this is the rhododendron season right here in Eugene. We have all kinds of rhododendrons, don't we, blooming. They're basically hybrids, cultivars. And this is a wild species, the rhododendron arboreum, the tree rhododendron, which is my favorite by far. It can be a huge tree, or as it gets higher altitude, it becomes smaller. Now, most plants have an altitude limit, but this rhododendron, you see it first at 6,000 feet, and the highest is 13,000 feet. And that's a huge elevation range, a huge temperature range for any one species of plant. Now, remember, these biological zones, we're moving up to the mountain tundra. We're moving up quickly, aren't we? I'm out of breath because we're going up so fast. Mountain tundra is at about, over 14,000 feet. The tree line is the key feature here. If the tree line is at 13,500, then the mountain tundra will be next. And here are bushes. Bushes that you see, the dark patches there are junipers. The light green patches are rhododendrons. The pink is a peticularis. And let's see, there's the orange on the right-hand side, that's a mountain ash. So the names are very familiar to the botanists, and I see several botanists in the group here. One of the birds that's found at this elevation is a snow pigeon, and they are basically Himalayan and are not found much farther beyond the mountains. And they occur at these cold temperatures, particularly in the mountain tundra. They occur near people's houses too, so you find them near the Sherpa villages. And when you're traveling, you have to have somebody carry your stuff. I can't carry stuff and try to hike uphill. I'm out of breath even to start with. So here it is, the pack-yak going along. Again, this is mountain tundra country. You can see the bushes and all. There's some Barberry there, these are all, now this is November, so they're all brown. But there are several different species of plants there, the bushes, but not really herbaceous. Then you get up into the mountain tundra. And this is all herbaceous. There are no woody plants. So we're talking now with 16,000 feet or up. I've seen a rhododendron up to 17,000, but that's unusual. I would suggest maybe 16,000 up is about where you would find the herbaceous zone in the Himalayas. And this is a funny looking snowball. It's a member of the Compositae family. You wouldn't think it, but it's very well protected from the cold, and it well should be at this elevation. This picture was taken at 16,500 feet. Aha, two more pictures of high altitude. The prunella there, the alpine accentor. Alpine accentors are a small little family of birds that look kind of like sparrows, but rather thinner bill. And they move by altitude movement. So in the summer, they're at high elevation, and in the winter, they're down in lower elevations. But this bird in the bottom right-hand side is, it doesn't move very far. It moves a bit when the snow covers. It's called a snowcock, and there are 5 species of snowcocks. They range in Central Asia and in the Himalayas. They're big birds, about, don't say, 3 times the size of a grouse. And at the higher elevations, there are some rocks, and you find the rocks, you find some plants. And this is the Waldheimia, the ground daisy, which manages to survive even at these elevations. Then the aeolian zone, or the zone of the wind, is above the last, basically the zone of life. Most animals, there's very little activity above 18,000 feet. There is some, because the food is then blown up the hill. And so that the little springtails and spiders and whatnot can live on food that is blown up from below. So that's why it's called the wind zone, or aeolian zone, usually above 18,000 feet. I don't have many pictures above that elevation. But there are birds up there, of course, not too many on the ground, above 18,000 feet. The snowcocks do go up to 18,000 feet, but birds land on rocks. The choughs, ravens, the lammergeiers, and these griffins will land on the rocks at those elevations. But basically, these two birds are just soaring. They're transferring from one place to another. So the lammergeier has a wingspan of 9 feet, and the griffin has a wingspan of 8 feet. Fairly good sized birds. The lammergeier is very much more agile, but it can't compete with the griffin. So when the two find, these are vultures, when the two groups find a kill, the griffin takes over, the lammergeier has to wait. And then when the lammergeier will pick up the remains, which could be bones. They can digest bones. So they sometimes carry a bone up into the air and drop it so that it fractures, and then they can swallow it. Not to mention, the only vulture that I know that can actually carry something in its talons. The eagles do also carry, of course. So this is basically, I think it's kind of a combination, eagle and vulture. The lammergeier, the bird at the top there. Then there are birds that move across the Himalayas. Now, these are not Himalayan birds because they're coming, these are demoiselle cranes, the smallest of them, rather elegant crane. They nest in Mongolia and Central Asia, then come down over the Himalayas in the autumn. And here they are landing. The lower picture shows a flock that is not able to get through the mountains because of the wind and the weather. So they're coming from the rather dry Tibetan plateau, and they come up against the Himalayas. They have to get through between the big peaks. So they then land and spend the night there in those stony flats. The next morning it's clear, and they take off. So there they are taking off. You can see them on the left-hand side on the top picture there. They're moving, and will go across, not even touch down. They'll touch down in India. They don't touch Nepal. But this is a major migratory route for these trans-Himalayan birds along the Kali Gandaki River between Annapurna and Dhaulagiri, two of the highest peaks in the world. Now we've finished our look at low elevation to high elevation, and now we're going to move from far east to far west. And this is the Siang River, which originates in Tibet near Mount Kailash. Actually, it goes through Arunachal, it's called the Siang. As it gets down into Assam, India, it's called the Brahmaputra. So this is one of the major rivers of South Asia. And here it is in July, which is rather, you can see it basically almost bank to bank water because of the monsoon. Now, along the banks of the river, we find butterflies, and these two represent butterflies that occur in South Asia and in Southeast Asia. There is, in the eastern part of the Himalayas, you have quite a relationship between Southeast Asia and the Himalayas. So that these are found, for example, you can see them in Burma, you can see them in Malaysia. A good many species like that. And then some of the older bridges were made out of bamboo and ropes. But not nowadays, of course, a very nice cable there hanging. So you don't, it's a little wiggly, but it does get you across the river. But notice the river. The river, this is a tributary to the Brahmaputra. The river, where's the river? Hardly any water. It's not monsoon. This picture was taken in November. See, things have all dried up. And the people living here in this area, their mother tongue is Adi, and they're very nice people. We really enjoy being with them. And they're hospitable and humorous, have lots of good stories. The Himalayas are just packed with people, all kinds of folks, most interesting people, really, and many of them are very conscious about conservation, others are not. And one of the special animals that lives here in the east is the clouded leopard. It's also found down into Southeast Asia, another species in Borneo. The beautiful little cat, I think. This was found, two little kits were found wandering in the middle of the road. The person picked them up and they were starving. They were basically emaciated. They picked them up, took them to the Itanagar Zoo in Arunachal, and they've been thriving there. So these are captive animals, two of them. There's one on the left-hand side. This is just the one on the right-hand side. They're not big cats, they're smallish cats. Now, we have 6 big cats, and these then are the next level down. 6 big cats, not all in the Himalayas. Little lions, for example, don't occur in the Himalayas. Aha, one of my favorite groups of birds is the bulbuls. Now, the bulbuls are noisy, they like to chatter, and in Persia, they are considered lovebirds. They sing in the Persian gardens. You have the lovely trees, shade, and the birds are singing. So they're considered birds of love. In this case, this one is found in sort of the edge of the forest. Not everything is found in forest, and not everything is found in the open. There are birds that like the edges and that sort of thing. So here's one. This is a hedge bird. Now another thing is that this was introduced into Florida, and it's created quite a pest because they eat fruit. And what do they do in Florida? They eat fruit. So it's considered an invasive in Florida. But boy, here in the Himalayas, it's a standard bird, one of my favorites. We're moving a bit here to the west. Now we're about 500 miles from the Siang River where we started. We've already gone. We're going to go 2,200 miles, remember. We've gone 500. This is the major center for one of the groups in Bhutan. The kings little mini kings had their own palaces and their own setups. And that's what these zongs are. Zong is both religious and personal, and is inhabited by people. And the purple down there is a jacaranda from Brazil. It's an exotic. There are exotics in the Himalayas too. It's not exactly all natural vegetation. The people there speak a language called Dzongkha, kind of related to Tibetan. Very pleasant people, very nice folks. We really like the Bhutanese. These little children are on the way to school. Then as you go up into the mountains to the north of that Naga zone, blue sheep are one of the common species found in the upland country. You can see this is above, pretty much above the tree line. These aren't really sheep, they're actually goats, but is the major prey for the snow leopard. Now I should have a snow leopard picture next. I've never seen one. I've seen tracks, they've been all over. I don't know that I've never seen them, I never will. Very elusive animals, beautiful creatures. I'd love to have a picture to show you next. I could have got cabbage one from somebody else, but it's non-productive. Let's go on to the next slide. And so the snow leopards are elusive, but this mountain is not, except this is it's sunrise. And so you have to get out of your tent. It's kind of cold out there. We're at 14,000 feet and cold, so get out of the tent, enjoy the sunrise on the mountain. Nobody has ever heard of this peak, but this is really, I think it's a very specially shaped peak. Then we all know about tea. I'm quite fond of tea. There's the oolong tea, there's Chinese tea, there's Indian tea, and the Darjeeling tea is considered some of the best tea in the world. We were in Kenya in a tea area, asked the tea grower there, what do you think is the best tea in the world? He said Darjeeling. So I'm convinced. I like it too. It's kind of mild. If you like a strong tea, it isn't that good. But here we are, a tea grove. The problem with tea is that you have to cut down the entire forest and put in your tea garden. So there is a real problem with trying to maintain natural habitat in this region called Darjeeling. But there's a tiger hill up at 9,000 feet above Darjeeling, which has very nice forest, very nice birds. So that if you're going to go birding in the Darjeeling area, there are birds, because at low elevations, you see lots of things. And up in this tiger hill, it's also very nice. Here we are. Sikkim is a little part of the Himalayas between Bhutan and Nepal. And it's drained by the Teesta River. Teesta River is at 2,000 feet down there. So maybe, sorry, 1,000 feet. And so it's a butterfly area. And our friend David Wagner, who is one of the outstanding naturalists here in Eugene, took this picture and gave it to me. So thank you, David. Then the Commodore, these are low country butterflies, but this one is fairly rare. Now, as you're down the Teesta River was 1,000 feet. This picture was taken from 15,600 feet. They go to La, but look at that beautiful peak. This is what the mountain should look like. And the elevation's at 27,800 feet. Not exactly a pipsqueak. Kanchenjunga itself, of course, is quite remarkable. And then nearby is this Silver Hut. Now, those of us that have read mountaineering, mountain climbing stories have heard of the Silver Hut. This is where Sir Edmund Hillary had a winter campaign to see if people could adjust to elevations by living at 19,000. I guess it turned out to be 18,000 feet. If you could live at 18,000 feet, would you be better adjusted, acclimatized for climbing up the next spring? Found out that they were not any better, in fact, worse, if they spent that time at 18,000 feet. Basically, the body deteriorates. We humans aren't adapted to those elevations, so it's best to acclimatize at lower elevation and not up winter up in the Silver Hut. So Silver Hut has been moved over into Sikkim and is one of the best known buildings in the entire area of Sikkim. Pikas, there are 12 species of, and maybe 16 species of pikas around the world. We have 2 here in the USA. The rest of them basically are in Central Asia, and they're found in high elevation. And also there are 1 or 2 species in forest. The man's name who discovered it or named it was forest, and this is a forest pika. Now we're at the edge of Sikkim, looking at Kanchenjunga from the west. Pictures taken from 12,000 feet with Himalayan fir, a very important tree at this elevation in the Himalayas. But from here, we're going to move now 100 miles to the east, and we're coming to a cluster of national parks and a very exciting conservation program there. So I'm going to move on and we'll see what here we are. We're now in Nepal. We've come 100 miles from that last picture, and this is the Sagarmatha, or Everest National Park. As you can see, it's about 400 square miles. Not a very big park, but boy, it has everything under the sun in it from the point of view of the Himalayan mountains, or at least at this elevation. Now, in this presentation, I'm not going to show you any pictures of Everest, because if anything you've seen a picture of Everest, and there's another picture of Everest, oh, a third picture of Everest. No pictures of Everest, thank you. But there are so many things below the summit. There's lots of things below Cap 2 that attract me. This is what I like to see. Now, rhododendron arboreum, we saw one earlier at a lower elevation, but it goes up to 13,000 feet. They become quite small, they're not very tall, and they turn whitish. Some of them are pure white, but they don't all bloom at the same time. Our experience is about once every 10 years, you have a synchronous blooming like this. So this, I was lucky to get this picture, be up in the area during the blooming, synchronous blooming of the rhododendron arboreum. My favorite, as I said before, rhododendron. You can't see this too well. The dafe is Nepal's national bird. The caption comes under the, whatever it is up the top there. So this is Nepal's national bird, and what a bird it is. These monarchs, there are about 5 species of monarchs, and this is the one found in the central Himalayas and western Himalayas too, for that matter. And it's one of the largest iridescent birds in the world. And here we are, Ringzing with his, we're in Pangboche Gompa. And you can see here's the Yeti scalp, which is well publicized, I must say. And the little Yeti hand. Turned out the hand was a young girl, and the scalp is from a goat, one of the goat antelope. So, and no Yeti. Traveling in the Himalayas for many years, been looking for the Yeti. Where is the Yeti? No Yeti. I haven't never seen a track of the Yeti. No sign of the Yeti. Come on now. Got to be some sign. Got to have some defecation. You got to have some scratches. You got to have scratches. Nothing. And this is one of the goats. It's one that's remarkably increased in numbers due to national park preservation. This whole area is a Sherpa country, and the Sherpas are brought into the whole national park system by basically all of the entry fees to the park. Half of it goes to the Sherpas. So that brings them into the community aspect. You have to have the community behind your conservation program. Otherwise, nothing is going to actually be long-term. Short-term, yes. Long-term, we have to have community involvement. And this is what's happening in the Everest area, with 50% of the proceeds from the park entry going to the villages, not to the villagers per se, but to the village. There's a committee that says, oh yes, we're going to do this for this year. And so that's where the money goes. It's a decision by committee. Now, this is the things that have happened because of the climbing, because of the fame of Everest. This is the major trading center, major village in the Everest National Park in 1973. 2005. What an incredible difference. It's not only because of the park fees, but also because people are coming, lots of people are coming. And they pay the guides, and then they're staying in hotel rooms now. We used to have to camp and loved attending, but you can't camp anymore. You have to stay in somebody's hotel, which is fine. It makes it a lot easier. Don't have to lug your tent all the time. And this lady she had a little tea shop, one sort of thatched roof, almost, not quite thatched, but it was one level. When we first went there, in the 70s, and now look at her. She has this huge big place that she's selling Cokes. I mean, what a change in my lifetime in the Everest National Park. You can also stop in for snacks and bakery, can you imagine? Now, there's another park that adjoins right next to the Everest Park. They're adjoining, and this is called the Makalu Baron National Park. And this was inspired by a colleague. The formative meeting for this particular inspiration of this park was in this cowshed. And these folks are high-level Nepalese officials, the chief of the planning commission, the chief of the university, the advisor to the king. So they're all sitting here in the cowshed. They've been to meetings. They've been to all kinds of meetings in five-star hotels. They've never been to a meeting in a cowshed. So this was quite impressive. And from this particular beginning, it moved on to the national park in 1992. There it is. It isn't huge, but it sure has some very interesting parts to it. And that adjoins the Everest Park. Now there's another most interesting program, which is, oops, unfortunately can't see it, the QNNP in Tibet. That's a Chomolungma National Nature Preserve. It covers how many square miles? 15,000 square miles without one warden. How could that be? Not one warden. But the animals are thriving. Blue sheep are coming up, the wild ass are coming up, snow leopards are on my lands are really thriving. It's because of community. The community themselves benefit from this park, and they then are the ones that protect the park. Initially, when we first started this business, when I first learned about parks, you had to, in a national park, you had to take people out. People can't live in a national park. But that doesn't work in Asia. People living in the park are the ones that actually benefit from the park. And so this program, a QNNP program, has been extremely successful in this entire area, which is huge, 15,000 square miles. And that adjoins Everest and also adjoins this Makalu Baron Park that I mentioned. And here's all kinds of things in this 18,000 square miles, different little nomadic tent there, or at least a Tibetan tent. And this is where the inspiration is. It's been developed by Future Generations EDU. If you want to find out more about this operation and the success of the conservation work and the community development, you can check on future.edu. Meanwhile, the thing is, it's a three-way partnership. You have to have outside help or outside, at least inspiration, or whatever they can do, whatever you can do from outside. But you have to have government control. You have to have government participation. So here we are. This is one of the members of Future Generations talking with government officials. And then the real key is the village helpers, the village workers. They then benefit particularly from the park. So here, this is a three-way process and been very successful. And the process has been about 40 years in developing. It's very successful now, and worldwide, by the way. We're running out of time here, so I'm going to have to move along. In the Indian Himalayas are well known from the pilgrimage point of view. Pilgrims. And when we went to look for birds and all, and plants and whatnot, the villagers will ask us, "Why are you coming here?" And we're going looking for birds. No way. What you're looking for stones, you're looking for gold, you're looking for medicinal plants, come on now. So the only thing they understood is we're here on a pilgrimage. And we were basically a pilgrimage to go to see the mountains and to experience the Himalayas. This is one of the famous, there are four special regions in the Indian Himalayas, and this is one of those. Gangotri is one of the Char Dhams of India. And the priest here is from a local village. It has to be a Brahmin, and then there are little offerings there that you can buy, that you can present to the shrine inside the temple. Now, this initially, because of the sacredness of this area, no hunting. And so Blue Sheep did well. This is a religious kind of preserve. You can utilize that kind of idea in conservation and play with Buddhists or Hindus or even others because of religious convictions. But now the government has been acknowledged. This is a national park, an area, and it's called the Gangotri National Park now. And so it's quite special. It initially started out as a religious park, a religious preserve, let's say, no hunting, and now it's recognized nationally. You'll have to pardon me, but this is a bit of a pilgrimage going back home. In a sense, this is where I grew up, and Ruth, sitting in the fourth row, also grew up here. So she recognizes the landscape here. The Tiri Garhwal in the Uttarakhand is where I spent my early years until I finished high school. Wonderful orchids down in the valley and nice forest, mostly oak forest. Here's the house that I grew up in. This is a very personal trip, by the way. I hope you don't mind. I enjoy going back on this sort of trip. Here we are with rhododendrons in the foreground, the oak trees on the right, some spindlewood or euonymus, also some big leaf dogwoods, Cornus macrophylla, and a few other major trees. Very much of a warm temperate forest. And this is the rhododendron that I especially like. We were told that as kids, don't ever climb in a rhododendron because they're fragile. They break off. You climb up a tree, you're going to fall off a branch. So we were very careful. We never climbed up a rhododendron tree, although they were quite alluring. It's a rather soft wood. So anyhow, and birds are particularly fond of the flowers. The flowers are pollinated by birds. As you can see here, this is a sunbird, which kind of takes the niche of the hummingbirds, because they also feed on nectar and also have the decurved bills like hummingbirds. Beautiful flowers. And again, one of my favorite groups of monkeys, the slender leaf-eating langur monkey. This one used to be around our house. We had a tin roof and a galvanized metal roof. And when the monkeys ran across the roof, boy, was there. It was worse than hail. Crash, 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 crash. They had good fun. And we couldn't grow nasturtiums in our garden. They were just, nasturtiums were like chocolate ice cream. And here, blue-capped rock thrush is an example of a bird that comes in the summertime. I think we've seen this already. Anyhow, summertime and then goes down into India for the winter. So there are birds that come into the Himalayas for summer and leave. Birds come into the Himalayas for the winter and then leave. And birds go up and down in the Himalayas. And then there are birds that are solid, stay all year long in the same area. Now this butterfly here is one found in an open country in rocks. Rock thrush is also pretty much an open country. And it's very typically well named the common wall. Now this is the common wall is sort of, the butterfly season is quite narrow, and it's particularly good in May. This is when the butterflies are particularly good. You don't actually find them around much of the year, but as you know, around here, you try to find the snow Apollo around here, it'll be here only in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks at the most. So very, very seasonal, these butterflies. This one is seasonal just before in May. Now, what happens in the eastern Himalayas in May? Oh, the pre-monsoon has struck. And it isn't butterfly catching season anymore. All of a sudden, the butterflies are all gone. And you know, it isn't exactly dry either. This is not monsoon, this is pre-monsoon. Monsoon is not, it's pretty much the same. Yep, it's kind of wet. You have to get used to being wet when you're in these mountains, particularly there. We're speaking of east. West is quite dry, not the east. Then there's some very nice butterflies out in the monsoon. Basically, they fly when it gets to be a little sun during the monsoon. Then there are things called leeches. Now, I mentioned that there are hardly any biting insects now. There are not very few ticks, very few fleas, but I can show you there are leeches, land leeches. And they have 3 little lips and they have teeth and they can burrow down in your ankle and you have to clue that they're gone. Then you look down, all of a sudden your sock is all red. The leech has been there. So the thing is that once you have a leech on you, you should pull it off as fast as you can so it doesn't inject a lot of heparin, a lot of anticoagulant. Now, they say that you shouldn't pull it off because it'll cause infection. But as far as I'm concerned, I've had hundreds of bites, pulled off hundreds of leeches and no infection. Now, some people are sensitive and they do get infected. I mean, you get a bite, you get infected. It just, the physiology of that particular person. And then there's a favorite tree of mine. It's called the deodar. Every time I drive around Eugene here, there's a deodar. There's a deodar, well planted around here. And it grows in the Western Himalayas. This is a species found only in the Western Himalayas and at reasonable elevations. This is a town called Simla, which is was a summer capital of the British Raj in India. And it's a place where Kipling wrote Kim, a well-known book at that time. Anyhow, this is one of my favorite trees. That's one of the 3 true cedars, Cedrus deodara. There are the 2 other cedars too, cedars of Lebanon, as you know. But I do like it. It's a very, very handsome tree. And you've seen it many times as you've driven around Eugene. Another Western species found only in the West is this tragopan. Basically, what's called the Western tragopan. It's a fairly good sized pheasant found in forest and fairly, I would say, much endangered because of habitat destruction. You've got to have habitat for these things. Habitat is absolutely key for conservation of some of these species. Habitat and a bit of protection. And then there's a situation where we have here in Eugene, we have living up in the Mackenzie Valley, we have fire and lightning fires. I never heard of lightning fires. It just doesn't happen in the Himalayas. I wonder why. That lightning comes with the rain. And there's no lightning in the winter when there's no rain. So it doesn't start fires. These are human-caused fires. And these pine needles, this sheer pine here is very similar to a ponderosa. It looks very similar, the bark and everything. And it's also a fire-resistant tree. And so you get either leaf litter or you get a sheer pine fire. A friend of mine, a colleague of mine, Bob Wolfender, took that picture of the sheer pine. And then there's a fire climax type of vegetation, which is in the valleys. As you get up in the mountains, of course, you get clouds, and so it gets rainforest, or you get cloud forest, or you get moss forest. But down in the valleys, now this is only 2,000 feet elevation, it gets really hot and extremely dry in summer. So that here we are, very dry fire climax. But there are certain plants, the wood 40 there, you can see a little red flower there, is one that can't survive a fire. And then this white-eye, the oriental white-eye, is a member of a family, only one species found in the Himalayas, but there are a good many species down into southeastern Asia and into actually island Asia. What do we call Oceania, perhaps, might be a good term. And with Kashmir is one of those places that has some fame But I can see, I think we're going to have to move along here. Kashmir, Dal Lake, Himalayas, what a wonderful place, 5,000 feet, totally disturbed now, politically. We went before the disturbance. It's such a sad situation there. But on the other hand, beautiful, beautiful territory. One of the products there is the saffron crocus, which has been is planted in special areas where there's special soils. And then this is the Dachigal National Park, which was built for the Maharaja. Many national parks in India are initially Maharaja's hunting reserves. The Maharaja used to hunt red deer here. Red deer are European deer. And Himalayan griffins, we've seen a Himalayan griffin, but not this close, is a common scavenger at these elevations. But look at those fir trees back there. They're extremely columnar, which means there's heavy, heavy snow. So a lot of heavy snow in Kashmir in the winter. And here are two pictures of the same lake. Picture on the top there is in early June, and then down in mid-August. And Max Marble, a colleague of mine, took that picture back there. So an amazingly fast change. The plant life has to survive that quickly. I mean, you've got totally covered, snow-covered slopes, and then all of a sudden open. Mid-August is a good time for plants, as you can see here. Mid-August, near Tarsar Lake. What you're looking at here is the plants. These are plants that are non-edible. You have Senecio, the yellow, you have pedicularis, and you have rumex there. I mean, a lot of things that the animals don't eat. There are a lot of animals in Kashmir. And people who heard about buckaroos, gujars, and bohos, I won't go into details here, but they have their own territories anyway in the summer, and they're all slightly different from the point of view of culture. They live the gujars live in houses here like this. Buckaroos live in tents. Now we've come to the end of in Kashmir. We've come to the end of the Great Himalayan Range. The other end was the Siang River, and now we're looking at the Indus Valley. This is the farther end of the Great Himalayan Range, but the Himalayas, as I see them, carry on. So now we're going into the far west. This is the end of the program here, pretty much. Far west. We end up, first of all, we come into the Karakorams, which are well-known climbing areas. Back in 1981, it wasn't easy to get to the Ascoli village. But people did get there, and we got there and got out, survived. Nice people in Ascoli. People speak a language called Balti, and it's initially related to Tibetan. And now this is the Baltoro Glacier that we're heading up. The black stuff you see on the right is ice. So this is a fairly decent hike up the Baltoro Glacier, 39 miles. Greg would like to walk on this one, but it's a little tricky. The footing's tricky. As you get farther up the glacier, it opens up. And so you can see there's some nice ice, and so much easier going. You don't want to slip on the ice, but nonetheless, the ice isn't very slippery. You just walk right along, as long as you don't fall into a crevasse. And you arrive at a camping site of 15,000 feet, basically on the ice, and you hear the creaking of the ice underneath your ear from the tent. But there's a broad peak up there, which few people have heard of. It's a very, very high peak, though, number 12 in the list of peaks. And one of the most famous peak of the Karakorams is K2, which, as you see, is 28,000 feet. And recently, within the last few months, a winter climb, 10 Sherpas working together all climbed up to the top of K2 in the winter. Absolutely phenomenal. This happened within the last 6 months. I was astounded. A wonderful accomplishment. And there's an area called Hunza, well known. Basically, it was publicized as a place where people live forever, 100 years, 110 years. Turns out that the people didn't realize didn't know what their birth dates were, but still they do live a long time. They work hard. They have limited food, so they don't, and they drink micaceous water. Micaceous water sets my tummy up. Micaceous water, but they survive. So this is one's major fort there, the old fort. Karimabad has the fields, and you see all those lines on the hills behind. Those must be highways. Huh? It kind of look like highways. What are they? Irrigation channels. This area is totally irrigated. It depends on irrigation. Depends on glacial melt. Now, when the glaciers recede and the glaciers disappear, these people won't have any water. So this is a major, major feature for the far western part of the Himalayas. Not so the east. East, about 10% of that Siang River can be glaciated in the south. The rest of it's all from rainfall. But those you can see extensive irrigation channels. And apricots are one of the big things there. People say the apricots, let's see what makes them live a long time. People are extremely nice. One of our favorite people of the entire Himalayan system. And all of our trips into the Karakoram, so Hindu Kush, we had Hunzas as our cap staff. Extremely loyal, extremely pleasant, extremely nice. The gentleman on the left was a gardener. He claimed to be 95. No, I don't think it was no age. And then there's the Karakoram highway, which has been drilled from Pakistan over the pass into China, or from China down into Pakistan. And there are glaciers that actually surge. And during 1980, there was a surge, and it disrupted a good part of the highway. Here they're trying to prevent damage. It doesn't happen very often. The surge isn't necessarily with more ice. It's a ice because of water underneath the ice flow. This is a place that you wouldn't want to be in the monsoon. Of course, there's no monsoon here over here in the far west. But it's rainy season. There is rain, and you have to be a little careful of falling rocks. So as you drive up, you look and be sure there's no falling rock, then you drive through. We've seen the falling rocks. We've escaped. Then we get to the pass at 15,400 feet, looking over into China. This is Xinjiang province in China. And this is Marco Polo sheep. Marco Polo sheep, the tallest sheep in the world, wild sheep, 4.5 feet tall at the shoulder. And that's a huge sheep. Marco Polo sheep country. And on the Pakistan side, there's this Marco Polo sheep preserve, a national park, which has been developed for that particular reason. So all through the Himalayas, you have these parks, developed often for a particular species or because of the particular beauty of the mountains. Now we get to the last range. It's called the Hindu Kush, which is in the far, far western part of the Himalayan system. And here we are at 12,000 feet. You can see birch trees. There are trees in the Hindu Kush, not many, and there are birds. There are not many, but there are mountains. And here's the Tirchmere Glacier, our group starting off on the left, going up the glacier. Again, the footing is tricky, but once you get going, it seems to be okay. You have to watch your step. So we finally got up to 16,000 feet, and here's our campsite. And we had a nice little nature walk up the hill, and there was a Himalayan snowcock nesting. She was very, very tame, and we were able to get a picture of her sitting on the nest. So this is the Hindu Kush, which then borders Afghanistan. This is on the extreme western edge of Pakistan into Afghanistan. So this is 2,200 miles from where we started in the Siang River. Siang River to this particular picture, Tirchmere is the highest in the Hindu Kush. That's a lot of country to cover. And I see we're really running out of time. So here we are. And thank you for joining me on this journey to the Himalayas.
Oh, Bob, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
We are going to have some time for some questions. So if there are any questions from people here in the audience, we'll take care of those. And then if there are any online, I think Debbie will try to collect those. So in the back. Okay, the question was about glacial ponds in the Himalayas that seem to be melting rather rapidly. And wondered if you had any information about those and what they're doing about it.
Not much can be done because of climate change. What you have to do is you have to change the climate. And that works fine. But the mountains, the glaciers are melting, but a recent colleague was up in the high country and the mountains are also melting. Boulders pouring down because the boulders have been held by ice. And when the ice melts, the boulders come tumbling down. So that was quite remarkable, I thought, in the sense of the melting mountains as well as the melting glaciers. The only thing you can do really is to change the climate.
We had 118 people viewing on Zoom, so that's pretty good, yeah. And Mary asks, why is the water in the lakes not frozen? That last one of the last pictures, there was one the lake, and there was ice all around it, but the lake itself wasn't frozen.
The Himalayas actually don't get that cold. You think it's cold, but they don't. So that there are very few Himalayan plants here in this area because they can't withstand the severe frosts we get. Pears, for example, very common plant you plant in the garden. Jim probably has some in his garden. We have some in our garden. The Himalayan pears will not do here. It freezes out. So it doesn't get that cold. It's cold enough, but it doesn't stay cold for a long time.
Wow, that's really interesting. Anything else? Former students have tuned in from Woodstock School.
Nice.
And they're saying thank you, that it was a great program.
Thanks for them too, for tuning in.
The question is about, do you have any recommendations for tour groups to go into these areas?
There are a good many now, particularly ones that I developed out of, say, Kathmandu. You wouldn't want to really go into Hunza or up into the Hindu Kush at this time. So there are certain parts of the Himalayas that really would not be recommended, but Nepal certainly is, Bhutan certainly is. Sikkim is a little harder. Arunachal, you have to get special permission, you can't just wander in. So Bhutan is particularly nice because it's a nice variety and they're easily handled, but you have to pay quite a bit of money to get in there, and you have to go via an organization in the country. Travel Bhutan is one. In Nepal, there are all kinds of people in Nepal that will do the trips for you. And it's best to go with somebody that knows what they're doing.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. This was a fantastic performance. I just really enjoyed it. I've been talking about doing this particular show for 3 years now. Has it been 3 years when I first started?
About 3 years ago.
Yeah, and it finally has happened. So wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for ordering.
Okay, good night, everyone. And remember, in the fall at the Campbell Center, we'll start our programming with Bill Sullivan. So see you then.